Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. This is your host, Amina Ahmed, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Welcome back to another episode of NextGen, where we speak about the issues that we're facing in our world and young people who are addressing these issues head on. You're watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Apple TV as well. Now, today's discussion is on the importance of commemorating the 1965 Bloody Sunday and Selma March and its connection to ongoing fights for racial justice and equality today. And I think one of the issues in our, generation is that when we teach and when we learn about civil rights and the movements for Black liberation, we learn about them as something of centuries ago, right? Of, the far past, not something that is so proximal and close to today. Many of our parents and our grandparents were born during that time. So when we do realize that it was something that was not too long ago, we're able to connect it to the ongoing fights for racial justice. And in order to talk about the importance of commemorating these events, we have with us today Jilisa Milton, who is an Alabama-based civil rights attorney, political analyst, social activist, for her community. She is absolutely phenomenal. We'll speak a little bit about your work, Jilisa. She's also one of the founders of BLM Birmingham. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Jilisa, it is awesome to have you. Knowing the work that you do, you're also a survivor of police violence. You're an advocate to speak about not just the issues of today, but connect them to the issues of our past. So tell us about the significance of the Selma March.
So Bloody Sunday was an incident where in the 60s, Black people who lived in Selma marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and to get voting rights based on a series of laws that blocked them out of the voting process. And that's anything from poll taxes to different laws that they had to overcome, literacy tests, things like that, to stop them from being able to vote. So this was a march for like racial justice and just access to democracy. And during that time, that the first time they crossed the bridge, they were beaten by state troopers before they were able to finish their march. And that's something that spearheaded a series of support to lead to the Voting Rights Act, which was introduced to make sure that different states did not impede upon people's rights to vote through those kind of tactics. And so we commemorate that incident, not necessarily to celebrate the harm that was done, but to make sure we remember like that our ancestors and people before us did these things in order to get us our rights.
I understand. So it is a way of, appreciating and highlighting their work in a way. But how does that connect to the fights for racial justice today? You are one of the founders of BLM Birmingham. Tell us about that and how that perhaps inspires you to do the work that you do today.
So I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, and I was adopted by my grandparents. So I heard a lot of things about their time during segregation as I was growing up as a child. So I had like this lens to like kind of what those dynamics were from people who were very close to me. And so that and also these conversations that helped me process things as I grew and saw and things that were happening along the way. Today, I see those things in the work that I do. I still have these conversations with my grandparents. I was a survivor of police violence, as you said before. Someone called a police officer when they saw my brother come into my house. And I was actually confronted by an officer that came into my house with a gun. And that particular incident is something that has driven me to do work on police reform and abolition. And because of just like carrying on that kind of conversation about like the state sanctioned violence, back when the march happened in Selma, there was a man named Jimmy Lee Jackson who was murdered by a state trooper after protesting in I think it was it wasn't in Selma, but it was in a neighboring county. And so it kind of connects in a way to the way that spearheaded some of the momentum to continue the work back then. Today, we see like Breonna Taylor, we see George Floyd, and how all of those different incidents remind us of how this problem is still here. So the work is kind of like something that's continuing to remind us that racial justice has not been achieved. So that kind of intergenerational connection is how I feel so connected to this work too, and of making sure we remember, we learn, we carry on, and we push through and continue it.
And I think that it's so significant that you talk about the work that was done decades ago. It's not over, right? It's an ongoing process, and I think that's important, right? It's not just we had this issue, we had the civil rights movement, and we're all done. We have racial equality. Rather, we still are seeing the effects of police brutality, in the communities around us. But the work of Jubilee, right? The work of your committee, your organization, I want to highlight that. I know that you are having a 3-day event coming up. And this time it's also going to be global, right? For the first time ever. Tell us about Jubilee.
So usually a Jubilee happens once a year on around this time of the year. To this year is on March 5th to 7th. And internationally, people haven't had the ability to kind of fly in and come to Selma and join all those thousands of people who are walking across and engaging with a series of educational events, meeting foot soldiers, going to their events, hearing speakers, bringing people from all over the country who talk about justice. Those things usually happen within Selma and within that physical space. But with us kind of having this whole, COVID has opened up a lot of opportunities for conferences and other events to kind of be more accessible. So this year is going to be streamed through a platform. And that platform is where anybody across the world can come and access it. And it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that is so amazing. And I'm excited, to our audience that is watching as well. We will be providing links on how you can join, how you can sign up, because this is amazing. This is an opportunity that we've obviously never had before, but because of COVID-19, things are changing. How has your planning process been affected by COVID-19?
Oh, we've had to do everything through Zoom too.
Yeah.
We haven't had like many physical like events where and talk, but we did film a virtual bridge crossing. So some of us came and social distance and filmed bridge crossing, so people can feel like they're still doing it, and that's going to be a part of the Jubilee as well. So that was kind of cool to kind of do like. Yeah, do that kind of thing. So
right, because everything is virtual. So if we do get to actually go out and do anything, it's it is exciting. But, Jilisa, tell us about this event that we're having. How can people, first of all, how can they join, and what can they anticipate? What are we going to be seeing in this 3-day virtual event?
So you can go to selmajubilee.com, and you can go /register to register. And we will have musical performances. We'll have speeches and talks. We'll have workshops. We'll have a film festival. There will be a chance to talk to, there'll be certain events that foot soldiers are planning so they can talk about what the history and the work, and just a series of just different conversations and different snippets of activists who live in Alabama now discussing how that work is pushed forward. So if you go register there, you'll be able to even look at the available events and see, which ones you want to attend, and kind of like different topics that also relate to like how we all are dealing with stuff now with all this stuff with the pandemic and all the issues that come up. So
yeah, that is amazing as well. But this is something that is going global, right? Like you said before, for the first time ever. Are you expecting a large international audience to attend?
We hope so. I really like the idea of having events like this where we know people can access the conversation, and we're kind of looking for those opportunities to in the next couple weeks, reach out to those people through channels. So if you know any channels, send us our way, because we really do, because especially because last year we saw a very huge reaction to the things that were happening in the Black Lives Matter movement globally. Like globally, just thinking about, and I personally felt very touched by that, just how people were supportive. So yeah, just kind of, and we want to invite them to kind of have this conversation, and if they would like to. So
Right, Jalissa, we got to keep that momentum, from the BLM movement where we saw it, earlier last year. We got to keep it going too now. So for the audience that are watching, make sure to join that event. I'll be joining for sure as well. And Jalissa, we'll continue to talk about the work that you are doing, particularly right after our short break. You're all watching us on Galaxy 19 satellites, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Apple TV as well. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NextGen. I'm here with Jilisa Milton, who's an attorney, who's an activist, advocate, extremely involved in her community. Jilisa, how do you think we can encourage young people to get involved, young people who want to be involved in BLM? You said this is an ongoing fight, right? It didn't end in Selma, and it won't end there. We have to continue this fight. How can we encourage young people?
So I think the biggest reason, first of all, that the Black Lives Matter movement has been so leaderful and so easy to access is social media, because that in itself is something that's really unique to our generation, especially with millennials and with Generation Z. And I feel like that was like what helped it boom. So like now there's a lot of that going on because of COVID, is those conversations. You can anywhere from the Movement for Black Lives, which is an organization that kind of is like very adjacent to Black Lives Matter, and other groups have these conversations a lot on like different trainings, it's different discussions. That's a really good way to go ahead and start kind of like grounding ourselves in what's happening. I still have to do that myself all the time because just, when things happen, you have to like regroup and think about how you want to work and how you want to do things. I also feel like there's just so many skills that we have. I don't have those kind of skills where I do like the graphics and illustration, or I do the work. I do more of like the policy work. There's people who do work around like just planning, just like event planning, having discussions like you're having. We all have those things that we're good at. And I think that it's a misunderstanding sometimes that you have to be a particular type of person to engage with movement work, because it's such a large community of people who want to make things change. So, I would say that we should just like think about these issues through that kind of self-education and those conversations, the dialogue, and then also think about what skills that we have that we can contribute to it.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the times people feel uncomfortable or maybe a bit insecure to go out there to start joining the work. Although they have the skill set, there isn't one particular skill set, obviously, and they have what it takes. They're talented individuals that can join these movements. But you are someone who has been part of this for a while now, in advocacy, in activism, in social work. What are some difficulties that you faced? I'm sure, you spoke a little bit about your experiences before, but how can the youth learn from those experiences?
Yeah, I had a little bit of difficulty with kind of thinking about like where my place was, in the movement that I really like to be around or work in. I'm a Black woman. And so there's like a lot of intersections between like gender and race and how that makes me different from other people. So like I had a lot of difficulty around kind of understanding myself as a Black woman. I think white allies have that kind of difficulty. And I think like Black men have that difficulty, and somebody else who maybe their identity is making them feel like, how do I fit in? So like, I think that exploration has been something that I've seen being a challenge for every person when they enter movement work. And I've had those thoughts myself, especially as an attorney who like imposed her beliefs in that way onto other people, but also being a survivor as myself. So it's just very, I think sometimes it's a challenge with identity. It's a challenge with whether that you have to think about your identity as an oppressed person or somebody who's an ally, like knowing how to navigate.
Yeah. And I think that, the question of identity is something that obviously comes up a lot, especially in today's world. As an attorney, this is an experience that is obviously, unique to you. How have you felt? How has your experience been as a woman of color? Has there been difficulty in that field? Because I feel that sometimes in our communities we aren't represented, right? They don't show Black attorneys. They don't show attorneys that are women of color often. So how did you deal with that?
I don't think I fit the frame that people usually think about when they think of attorneys. And you might hear different stories about maybe Black people feeling like they've been treated like the help, or they're not an attorney, you must be a clerk, or you must be a secretary. Like, people don't always assume, even subconsciously, that you might fit into that box. So sometimes I do have those struggles when I don't feel like I'm being like perceived the way I should be perceived as somebody who can do things. But I also feel like one of the biggest challenges I feel as a Black woman in the southern region of the United States is that there's not that many of us who look like me, let alone do civil rights work. So it's like I feel that kind of responsibility of like being that person that's able to help, or being somebody who's able to understand what people need. And sometimes I get a little frustrated with movement because we don't have enough legal resources. And I feel sometimes like that kind of frustration, like, how do I make sure that, because I have access to this space, people can get those things? And so I do feel like both a responsibility, but sometimes I also feel that people don't always understand where I'm coming from as a Black woman.
Sure. So to begin with, there's that pressure already, right? Where, people are looking at you, they're like, she doesn't really fit the box. But then there's this responsibility of having to uphold all of that because there aren't many people that, look like you in your field. That is a lot to deal with. How are you dealing with all of that, right? What do you do to allow yourself, especially in the pandemic, we're all quarantined. I hope you're doing something for your mental health as well.
Yeah, I really feel that other Black women who are professionals, I feel very connected to them. We can have conversations. We can talk about what we're going through. We can have, and even like-minded people, even whether they're Black or not. Right now, I'm vice president of National Lawyers Guild, which is one of the largest like bar associations or like membership groups for attorneys and for legal workers and law students who are radical leftist lawyers, essentially. And that's a space that I often feel connected to, because I'm like, oh, they think like me though. Like, at least they think like me, and they have the same goals as me. And so those spaces are very important to me, regardless of what work I'm doing, because it helps me not feel that isolated.
Right. And I think that's the number one thing, right? Like a lot of us, we do certain work and we do feel alone. And I hear a lot of activists and organizers tell me that they do feel alone and underappreciated. And you guys are underrated. I think people who are on the ground, who are doing this work, they're definitely underappreciated. So shout out to the work that you do, for real. We appreciate you for that work. But before we end here today, Jilisa, I want you to leave the youth, right? The youth that are looking at you and they're like, I want to do that, right? I want to find myself doing the work that she's doing, the social work, the work for racial equality. What are some tangible action items that you can give them? What are some next steps that they can take?
I think like really understanding, I think people don't always know this about me, but I took a lot of time to explore. I can seem very focused and directed now. Like I can seem like, oh, I always knew.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily true, because I took time to try things and go and try, see what's in this space, what these people are doing in this space. What kind of work are they doing? What kind of work are they doing over here? What kind of work, and that frames what I am today, because I took the time. You don't have to feel the pressure of being like just together. You can take the time to do those things. We're young. We have the time to like not, to do those things. And I feel like that was definitely important in my life. And whether that's international travel and understanding how it looks globally, whether that's reading, whether that's different classes, whether that's going to like work with different groups who work on different topics. You don't have to be the expert. And that's one thing I knew off jump was like, I just want to see what's going on. It wasn't until I start realizing and looking at my own life that I was like, I see that I need to advocate for the things that were happening to me and my family, because those other things helped me understand it. So like, yeah, I think just don't feel that you have to take on the world and you have to be perfect. Just take the time to just, I guess, like be creative in this and explore about like, and you'll come to your own understanding of what you believe and what you want to do.
Right. I think that is some really amazing advice that you leave us with, that figure out what you're passionate about. You know, there are a bunch of issues out there, and only by exploring, you're going to end up figuring out what it is that you actually want to work behind. So thank you so much, Jilisa Milton, for being here with us today. And thank you for the work that you do. And thank you so much to our audience for tuning in today on NextGen. And until next week, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. Take care, everyone.